You are probably not getting enough sleep. Not because you are lazy, not because you lack discipline, because at some point in your adult life, you absorbed a story that said sleep was the negotiable variable, the thing you could compress to make room for everything else that mattered: the hustle, the work, the goals, the building. The story said successful people sleep less, that 5 hours was a badge of commitment, that the grind required sacrifice, and sleep was the most obvious sacrifice available. Matthew Walker spent 20 years as a neuroscience and sleep researcher at UC Berkeley, dismantling that story with a body of evidence so comprehensive and so alarming that when his book Why We Sleep was published, it changed the conversation about health, performance, and rest more decisively than anything written in the previous 50 years. The short version of what he found is this: sleep is not recovery time. Sleep is not the absence of wakefulness. Sleep is an active, essential, irreplaceable biological process during which your brain consolidates memory, repairs cellular damage, regulates hormones, processes emotion, clears neurotoxic waste, and, most relevant to everything the Vitality Edit is building, physically consolidates the new neural pathways that your reconditioning practices, your affirmations, your visualizations, and your wealth file rewrites are generating during the day. When you sleep too little, you do not just feel tired, you undo the work. Today, we go into the most underrated tool you already own. Welcome back to the Vitality Edit by CosmiReads. Video 2. In Video 1, Vanderpolk showed us that the body keeps the score, that the nervous system holds the patterns that determine whether we contract away from abundance or open toward it. Today, Walker shows us that the sleeping body is where those patterns are either consolidated into permanent neural architecture or quietly lost. Because here is what most people in the manifestation and wealth-building community do not know. Dispenza's elevated emotion practice, Ecker's wealth file reconditioning, Schwartz's RAS reprogramming, Murphy's subconscious affirmation work, all of it generates new neural activity during the day, and all of it requires deep sleep to consolidate that activity into lasting structural change. The brain that skips sleep is not a brain that has completed less work. It is a brain that has undone the work it already did. Walker calls sleep the single most effective thing you can do to reset the health of your brain and body every 24 hours. Every financial decision you make, every emotional regulation practice you attempt, every new identity you are trying to inhabit, all of it runs on the biological infrastructure that sleep either builds or degrades. This is not peripheral to the Vitality Edit. This is its foundation. Before the science, a moment with Walker himself. He is not a wellness influencer. He is a neuroscientist with a laboratory, a clinical research program, and data gathered from decades of sleep studies across human and animal populations. His journey into sleep research began with a simple observation that virtually every disease linked to premature death and reduced quality of life has a significant relationship with insufficient sleep. Cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, obesity, diabetes, depression, anxiety, immune dysfunction. Not coincidentally correlated, causally linked in both directions. Sleep deprivation increases the biological risk of every major disease on that list, and insufficient sleep accelerates the progression of every one of them once present. He spent 20 years asking why sleep does so much, and what he found is that the question was inverted. The better question is, what does sleep not do? Because the answer to that question is much shorter. Sleep touches every biological system in the human body. not as a passive maintenance process, as an active and irreplaceable construction project. The first key insight is the one that reframes sleep from a passive state into an active investment. And once you understand it, the decision to compress sleep will never feel like a productivity strategy again. Walker identifies two types of sleep, NREM sleep and REM sleep, and shows that each performs specific and non-substitutable functions. NREM sleep, the deep, slow-wave sleep of the early night, is where the brain transfers information from the short-term storage of the hippocampus into the long-term architecture of the cortex. Every new skill practiced during the day, every new belief statement rehearsed during the morning practice, every new financial identity stepped into during the day's decisions, all of it is sitting in hippocampal short-term storage at the end of the day. Fragile, temporary, waiting. Deep NREM sleep is the biological process that moves it from temporary to permanent, from fragile to structural, from something you did today to something you are becoming. REM sleep, the dream-rich sleep of the later night, is where the brain processes emotional experience. It takes the emotional charge out of difficult memories. It integrates new emotional learning. It is the biological mechanism through which Dispenza's elevated emotion practice and van der Kolk's somatic processing are actually embedded into the nervous system. Cut the sleep short, and you cut the REM. Cut the REM, and the emotional processing is incomplete. The old patterns retain their charge. The new ones never fully land. Oliver was a 43-year-old financial advisor who had been building his practice for 12 years on an average of 5.5 hours of sleep. He was successful by every external measure. He was also chronically reactive, making decisions under a background pressure of emotional dysregulation he had normalized so completely he no longer recognized it as dysregulation. He had tried Ecker's reconditioning work. He had tried Dispenza's morning practice. He had tried van der Kolk's somatic regulation. All of them helped in the moment. None of them seemed to hold. He read Walker's first chapter and connected a wire he had not known was disconnected. His sleep was destroying the consolidation of everything he was building during the day. He was putting in the work. His biology was erasing it every night. He restructured his sleep before his morning practice, not by adding anything, by protecting 7.5 hours of uninterrupted sleep as the foundation that everything else ran on. Within 6 weeks, the morning practice produced results it had never consistently produced before. Not because the practice had changed, because the brain receiving it had enough sleep to consolidate what was being installed. The second key insight is the one that most directly challenges the hustle narrative, and Walker delivers it with the precision of someone who has spent 2 decades watching the same mistake produce the same catastrophic results. Sleep deprivation is not a minor inconvenience you can compensate for with caffeine, willpower, or weekend recovery. It is a cumulative biological debt that compounds with interest and produces measurable cognitive and emotional degradation that the sleep-deprived person is almost entirely unable to detect in themselves. Walker documents this with research that is both precise and unsettling. After 16 hours of wakefulness, the brain begins to show measurable performance impairment. After 17 hours, the cognitive impairment is equivalent to a blood alcohol level of 0.05%. After 19 hours, it is equivalent to legal intoxication. People who are sleep-deprived consistently rate their own performance and decision-making ability as adequate or good, because the very neural systems required to accurately assess performance are among the first to degrade under sleep deprivation. You are not a reliable judge of how impaired you are when you are impaired. The financial dimension of this insight is direct. Every significant financial decision you make on insufficient sleep is a decision made by a cognitively impaired instrument. Robbins showed us that cognitive agility, the function of the prefrontal cortex, is the brain structure most required for sound financial decisions. Walker shows us that the prefrontal cortex is also the brain structure most severely degraded by sleep deprivation. The tool you most need is the first tool you destroy when you compress sleep. James was a 38-year-old entrepreneur who prided himself on his capacity to function on 6 hours. He had built a successful e-commerce business through a combination of genuine skill and what he described as his ability to outwork everyone around him. He read Walker's second chapter on a Tuesday morning after a week of averaging 5 hours due to a product launch. He took Walker's recommended online cognitive assessment. His scores were in the significantly impaired range. He took the same assessment 3 days later after 3 nights of 7.5 hours. His scores were dramatically different. Not because his intelligence had changed, but because his brain had been given the biological conditions to function at its actual capacity. He told me the most confronting thing about the experience was not the assessment scores. It was remembering specific decisions he had made during the sleep-deprived week and recognizing, in retrospect, from a rested brain, the quality of reasoning those decisions had actually contained. He restructured his launch planning to ensure adequate sleep in the 2 weeks before any significant business decision was required, not because he cared less about the launch, because he finally understood that the brain making the launch decisions was the most important variable in the launch outcome. The third key insight is the one with the most direct connection to van der Kolk's work from Video 1. And it is the insight that explains something many people on a healing and manifestation journey have experienced without having language for it. REM sleep is the brain's emotional processing system. During REM sleep, which occurs predominantly in the final hours of the night, the hours most often sacrificed by early alarms, the brain reprocesses emotional memories in a neurochemical environment that is uniquely stripped of the stress hormone noradrenaline. In this specific biological state, the brain can revisit difficult and charged emotional memories without re-traumatizing itself. It can integrate the emotional learning from those experiences without being overwhelmed by their original charge. Walker calls this overnight therapy, the nightly process by which the emotional sting is taken out of painful memories and the wisdom of difficult experiences is retained without the ongoing activation of the stress response. The connection to van der Kolk is precise. The somatic imprints he described, the body patterns that hold old emotional charge and fire automatically in situations resembling the original experience, are maintained, reinforced, or processed and released in direct proportion to the quality and quantity of REM sleep the nervous system receives. Every hour of REM sleep you sacrifice is an hour of overnight therapy you did not receive. The patterns you are working to release through somatic practice during the day require REM sleep at night to actually process out of the nervous system. The body heals during sleep, not just physically, emotionally, neurologically. David was a 46-year-old architect who had been doing somatic therapy for 18 months with genuine commitment and genuine results until a period of high project pressure led to 6 weeks of averaging 5.5 hours, regularly sacrificing the final 90 minutes of sleep for early starts. During those 6 weeks, the somatic progress he had built over the previous year seemed to regress. Emotional triggers that had softened returned with something close to their original charge. Stress responses he had learned to regulate became harder to intercept. He attributed it initially to the pressure of the project itself. Walker's third chapter gave him a different explanation. He had been cutting his REM sleep, the biological window during which his somatic therapy was being processed and consolidated, at exactly the moment when the therapy was doing its most important work. He was attending the sessions. His brain was not completing them. He re-protected his sleep, including the final 90 minutes he had been cutting. Within 3 weeks, the somatic regulation capacity he had built over 18 months returned. The therapy had not regressed. It had simply been waiting for the REM sleep required to consolidate it. The fourth key insight is the practical framework Walker offers for rebuilding sleep after years of compression, and it is more accessible and more immediately impactful than most people expect. Walker identifies the specific practices that most powerfully protect and restore healthy sleep architecture. Regularity, going to bed and waking up at the same time every day, including weekends, is the single most powerful intervention available. The circadian rhythm is a biological clock of extraordinary precision that requires consistency of timing to function optimally. Irregular sleep timing, even with adequate total hours, disrupts the circadian architecture and degrades sleep quality. Darkness and temperature. The bedroom should be genuinely dark and cooler than most people keep it, around 18 degrees Celsius, because core body temperature must fall to initiate sleep. The removal of screens at least 1 hour before sleep, not because of habit, but because the blue light spectrum from screens suppresses melatonin production by up to 50%, and the elimination of alcohol as a sleep aid, because while alcohol does induce sedation, it actively suppresses REM sleep and fragments NREM architecture, producing a night of sedation rather than a night of biological restoration. The vitality edit connection here is clear. Elrod's miracle morning requires a consistent wake time. Walker shows us that the consistent wake time is only as powerful as the consistent sleep time that preceded it. The morning practice runs on the biology of the night. Protect the night, and the morning practice compounds. Compress the night, and the morning practice works against a biological headwind that no amount of willpower can overcome. Marcus was a 31-year-old software developer who had always considered himself a night person, someone whose natural rhythm was late nights and late mornings, disrupted by the 9-to-5 his work required. He had been averaging 6 hours during the working week and attempting to compensate with 8 or 9 on weekends. Walker's fourth chapter showed him the specific mechanism by which weekend recovery sleep was insufficient to restore the cognitive and emotional deficits accumulated across 5 days of undersleeping. The social jet lag, the circadian disruption produced by a 5 to 7 hour sleep timing shift between weekdays and weekends, was producing a state equivalent to flying between time zones twice a week. He restructured completely. Same bedtime every night, including Friday and Saturday, aligned to a wake time that allowed 7.5 hours before his required start. The first 3 weeks felt like going against his nature. By week 4, the natural tiredness was arriving at the new bedtime without effort. By week 6, his focus during working hours had improved so measurably that colleagues commented. He had not changed his skills, his tools, or his work. He had changed the biological infrastructure everything ran on. The fifth key insight is the one that closes the Walker framework and connects why we sleep to the complete arc of the Vitality Edit series. Sleep is the foundation of every other health and performance intervention you will ever make. Not one of several important factors, the foundation. Walker's research is unambiguous on this point. The return on investment from any health, cognitive, emotional, or manifestation practice is directly proportional to the quality and quantity of sleep underpinning it. Exercise produces greater physiological benefit when supported by adequate sleep and reduced benefit when imposed on a sleep-deprived system. Nutrition is processed and utilized more efficiently in a rested body. Emotional regulation practices reach deeper and hold longer when the brain has completed its nightly REM processing cycle. Financial decision-making is more precise, more aligned, and more resistant to fear-based reactivity when the prefrontal cortex has had the sleep it requires to function at capacity. Van der Kolk's somatic healing accelerates when sleep provides the overnight therapy that completes what the day's practice began. Schwartz RAS reprogramming consolidates more rapidly when NREM sleep transfers the new instructions from hippocampal short-term storage to cortical long-term architecture. Everything we are building in the Vitality Edit, every healing, every regulation, every new neural pathway, every widened window of tolerance is multiplied by sleep and diminished without it. Not metaphorically, biologically, measurably. This is why Walker placed sleep first, not because it is more important than movement or nutrition or emotional processing or spiritual practice, but because without it, none of the others deliver their full return. Sleep is not what you do after the important work is done. Sleep is the most important work. Theo was a 50-year-old teacher who had spent 3 years working on his health. Improved nutrition, a consistent exercise practice, regular meditation, weekly therapy, and a genuine commitment to the somatic and nervous system regulation work he had encountered through van der Kolk's framework. His results were real, but plateaued. He had improved significantly from where he had started. He could not seem to move beyond a specific ceiling of energy, emotional regulation, and cognitive clarity. He read Walker and recognized the missing variable immediately. He had been sleeping 6 hours nightly for 11 years, a pattern so normalized he had stopped experiencing it as insufficient. He began protecting 7.5 hours with the same deliberateness he had brought to every other health practice. The results were not subtle. Within 4 weeks, his meditation reached depths it had not previously accessed. His somatic regulation held under stressors that had previously overwhelmed it. His focus during the school day extended in ways his colleagues noticed. He told me that improving his sleep had not added one more health practice to his list. It had multiplied the return on every practice already there. He described it as turning up the volume on a radio that had been playing quietly in the background for years. Everything was suddenly clearer. Everything was suddenly louder. Not because anything had changed, because the foundation was finally right. 5 ways to apply why we sleep to your Vitality Edit practice right now. 1. Set your sleep and wake times tonight. The same time every night, including weekends. Regularity is the single most powerful sleep intervention available. Pick a wake time that works for your morning practice and your obligations. Count back 7.5 hours and make that your non-negotiable sleep time starting tonight. 2. Audit your bedroom for the 3 biological sleep conditions Walker identifies as most impactful. Is it genuinely dark? Blackout curtains, no standby lights. Is it genuinely cool, around 18 degrees Celsius? In our screens, removed at least 60 minutes before sleep. Not just turned over, but removed from the room entirely. 3. Re-examine your alcohol use as a sleep aid. If you drink in the evening believing it helps you sleep, Walker's research requires you to update that belief. Alcohol sedates, but it actively suppresses REM and fragments NREM. The nights you drink are the nights your overnight therapy does not run and your neural consolidation does not complete. 4. Add the sleep audit to your morning practice awareness. When you sit down for your miracle morning, take 30 seconds to assess the quality of last night's sleep before beginning any cognitive or visualization work. If the sleep was significantly compromised, give your nervous system 15 minutes of somatic regulation before beginning, because the biological infrastructure is not yet at full capacity. 5. Treat sleep protection with the same strategic intentionality you treat your Freedom Fund. It is not a lifestyle preference, it is a performance and healing investment. Every hour of adequate sleep is a night of neural consolidation, emotional processing, and biological restoration. Every hour sacrificed is a compound loss. Your 7-day sleep challenge. Day 1. Set your sleep and wake times, the same every night this week, including the weekend. Day 2. Audit your bedroom. Darkness, temperature, and screens. Make every change tonight. Day 3. Track your sleep quality in your journal each morning. Note total hours, quality, and how your morning practice lands differently on rested versus under-rested nights. Day 4. Eliminate alcohol on weeknights this week and notice what changes in your dream quality, your morning emotional state, in your cognitive clarity before noon. Day 5. Add the pre-practice sleep assessment to your miracle morning. 30 seconds, honest check-in, somatic regulation if needed before cognitive work. Day 6. Review the week's sleep log and identify your single biggest sleep disruptor, the one pattern most reliably shortening or fragmenting your sleep. Make one structural change. Day 7. Run your full Vitality Edit morning practice after the best sleep of the week. Regulated nervous system, completed REM, consolidated neural pathways, and notice the difference in how deeply the practice lands.
Drop one word in the comments that describes what changes when your brain has had the sleep it actually needs. Just one word. I read every single one. Why We Sleep is not a book about rest. It is a book about what becomes possible when you stop treating the most important biological process your body performs as the most negotiable variable in your day. Van der Kolk showed us the body holds the score. Walker shows us the body heals the score. Every night, in the dark, in the silence, in the specific biological restoration that no supplement, no practice, and no amount of willpower can replicate. Protect it. Everything else in the Vitality Edit depends on it. Hit the like button if this changed how you will think about tonight. Subscribe and hit the bell because video 3 is Breath by James Nestor, and it will show you that the most powerful nervous system regulation tool you own is the one you are using right now without knowing how. Your free downloads are in the description. Thank you for being part of CosmiReads. Heal it, feel it, live it. See you in the next one.